Welcome back to another episode of the Field of 68's off-season grades. My name is Rob Doster. I have John Fanta here with me, and we are going to be breaking down the St. John's Red Storm, the Fighting Rick Pitino's, if you will, Fanta. Let's roll through what their roster change is going to be heading into this season. They lost, well, like kind of everybody except Big Zoobs. Aaron Scott's gone, Kadari Richmond is gone, Devin Smith is gone, RJ Lewis is gone. And Simeon Wilcher is gone. They've brought in from North Carolina, transfer Ian Jackson. From Stanford, transfer Oziah Sellers. From Cincinnati, transfer Dylan Mitchell. From Arizona State, transfer Jozon Sannon. From Idaho State, transfer Dylan Darling. A couple of freshmen. Brought back a couple of guys. Ruben Prey is the one name that you want to know other than the Zuby Ejiofor. But the biggest name on this list, the biggest transfer that they've brought in, and maybe the one transfer that would be best suited for a reality television show based on how the last year has played out is Bryce Hopkins from Providence, who did not go to Georgetown, did not follow Ed Cooley down there to Washington, D.C. He is in New York City as the centerpiece of what Rick Pitino is building this year at St. John's. What do you make of this team? What do you make of this group? What do you make of this program? What do you make of year 3 for Rick Pitino in Queens?
Well, what I make of the program is they're back on top. They're back at the top of the headlines. They're as compelling a program as any in college basketball because when you have Rick Pitino and now you've just won 31 games, 31 wins to 5 losses, and now you have unfinished business. It's not just they made the Sweet 16 and they're fully back. Well, they're not fully back in March Madness. They won a game over Omaha. They still haven't been to a Sweet 16 in a quarter century. If you're St. John's, you accomplished a lot this past season. You won the Big East regular season. You won the Big East tournament. It was your first outright regular season Big East title since 1985. Rob, the Garden has become a monster. It has become it's been a wake up the echoes type of cycle for St. John's. They sold the building out 5 consecutive Saturdays to close the season. That's amazing. 6 counting the Big East tournament. That's really incredible. In the transfer portal, they're always going to clean up because they've got no bull money from Mike Rapoli. They've got Matt Abdelmassih, who I think is as good now of a general manager that you're going to find. This is a guy who every day is looking at how he builds this into a national championship team. This is a guy who will be watching every game, week 1 of the season, this upcoming year, and saying, here's how I start building 26, 27. Doesn't stop. So they've got a formula for success. And when you look at who they brought in, they don't need any one part to be extraordinary for them to be a Final Four contender other than Zuby Ejiofor. Zuby Ejiofor is back, and they're counting on him to be that man in the middle. What version of Bryce Hopkins are we going to see? Will we see the Ian Jackson that averaged 20 points per game over a 7-game stretch at Carolina and then was on a Carolina team that frankly was not very good? And as a freshman, it's hard to be in that setting. Joe Sannon, Oziah Sellers, St. John's and Rick Pitino are a different monster than your previous programs.
That is
I
true.
thought that Dylan Mitchell was a money pickup because he's the type of guy that fits Pitino to a T. Pitino likes guys that don't need to shoot the basketball to impact winning. Dylan Mitchell doesn't need the basketball to impact winning. He's going to defend his ass off. He's going to rebound. Dylan Darling, hearing a lot of good things. You're coming from the Big Sky at Idaho State to New York City. It's a huge transition. Transition is the word for 3 guys. Sannon, Sellers, Darling in particular. If 2 of those 3 even pan out, man, oh man, we are looking at a team that right there is going to be the top of the country. And as you and I are taping, we were talking about UConn as well. There may not be a more fun storyline in college hoops in a conference than this budding Rick Pitino, Dan Hurley, back and forth, try to be friendly on camera, but we know behind the scenes they want to beat the hell out of each other. It's really good stuff.
Yeah, it's the perfect kind of rivalry, right? When they respect each other just enough that they know that they can't go out there and talk shit publicly, but behind closed doors, it's a fucking. You know what I mean? I will say this about St. John's and the roster that Pitino has built. It's going to look very different than it did last year where they were all defense, all rebounding, all forced turnovers, and they couldn't really make a shot outside of the lane. Um, Ian Jackson is a shooter. Sellers is a shooter. Bryce is a guy that can make shots. I don't know if I necessarily call him a shooter, but he's a guy that can make shots. Sandin is a guy that can make shots. Dylan Darling is a shooter, right? Like they've upped their ability to make threes from the perimeter. They do not have the same level of defensive intensity. I think that they're going to. There's just no way that you can when you lose RJ and Kadari, right? Like those two were two of the best defenders you're going to find because they're big, they're switchable, they can guard point guards, they can guard fives in the Big East. So how that plays out is going to be something that's interesting to me. But it's Rick Pitino. I think he'll figure that. I'm not worried about that. What I'm worried about is the point guard spot, right? Dylan Darling going from Idaho State
Yeah.
to the Big East. That's a big step up, right? Like he's a tough kid. He comes from a football family, so I think that he'll be fine. But fine is not going to be good enough when we're talking about like national championships because St. John's has Rick Pitino as their coach. He's won titles. He's cut down nets at the Final Four before. Um, he won the Big East last year. He won the Big East tournament last year, right? There's been a level that has been set where the expectation is we're going to continue to improve. The only way to get to the next step is to get to a Final Four, win a national championship. And I wonder if the point guard play is going to be good enough because one thing that we've heard is we're going to experiment with Ian Jackson being our point guard. And I'm sorry, Ian, all due respect, I don't think that turning a guy whose entire career has been I'm going to get up as many shots as I can and score as much as I can into a point guard is necessarily the answer that is going to make the most sense. So that's my biggest question is what does that point guard spot turn into? Because I think that they need it. When you're a team that's going to be built on scoring more than you were last year, it's not going to be offensive rebounds. It's not going to be steals. You're not going to be getting as many easy buckets that way. You got to have someone that can run stuff in the half court. That's the biggest thing for me. That's the X factor for whether this team is good to like, okay, we need to talk about them in the same conversation as Purdue and Houston and Florida.
Yeah, I think that you're absolutely right that is the main X factor. The other X factor is Zuby Ejiofor's health.
Mm-hmm.
Because behind Ejiofor, like I'm all for it. Vince Iwuchukwu is now down at Georgetown. You know, he at least was a serviceable backup. Now, Ruben Prey is a good returnee.
Yes.
Keep an eye on Ruben Prey. He actually could be an X factor for this team because last year he showed some real flashes for St. John's, even knocked down a couple of threes. Keep an eye on this kid. You know, he's an international talent who last year was
right?
Portuguese was sort of a late ad, and I like his game. He's 6'10". You know, they're going to require him. They're going to need him to play a key role for them as their backup big man. But obviously, Rob, like Ejiofor's got to stay healthy for this team to reach the places where they want to go. Because it's not like you've stockpiled your backcourt.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if I think Rick has been public about this, Ian Jackson's going to start the season at point guard. Now, he might play 3 minutes at point guard, and then they say, you know what, we can't watch this. We're going to go with Dylan Darling. But, you know, there's not – the difference with this season is last year, this upcoming year's team, I'm here to tell you guys, I'd be very surprised if they go 31-5. The schedule's a lot harder in the non-conference. Like last year, you know, they played Baylor, and then because they collapsed in that game, they played Virginia. Virginia was not Virginia. They played New Mexico at home. Now the schedule wasn't great the last season. It just wasn't. You were rooting for Kansas State. We know how Kansas State turned out. It didn't work. So they stacked up wins in conference play. They went and won at Marquette. You know, they swept Marquette and they swept UConn. So it ended up being a non-issue. This year, and what I mean by that is when you turn the calendar to January last year, Rob, Kadari Richmond had not had a good season. He had not. It was not working. The last 2 months of the season were very different. This year, and I give credit to Rick Pitino as well for this, but you scheduled Alabama on the first Saturday of the season. I mean, holy cow. At the Garden.
That's going to be a fun one. That's going to be a fun one.
You've got Alabama. You've got Ole Miss, right? You've got Kentucky down in Atlanta. You've got the Players era. You're going to play Baylor, revenge opportunity, and Iowa State. And Iowa State, they're not slowing down, right? They still have Lipsy. They still have Milan Momcilovic. They're still going to be a really dangerous top 15, maybe top 10 team. So St. John's doesn't have a load of Quinnipiac and like they're playing those teams still, but not to the same degree. So the point guard situation, you and I both know this, Rob. When your schedule revs up, the one position where it's really hard to like be trying to navigate in game is point guard.
Yes.
It is. You could stumble severely if you don't have that position figured out. So that your X factor is mine as well, and just the health of Ejiofor. Because when I'm talking St. John's, I'm talking about and to that degree, Hopkins. Like, we don't know what version of Hopkins we're going to see. We really do not. The guy hasn't played coordinated basketball at a high level in 2 years.
If you haven't heard by now, we have partnered with BetMGM for the season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks, and we'll have special offers for the listeners and the viewers. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using the bonus code FIELD. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you'll receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets. Go download the BetMGM app and use the code FIELD today. Look, you're 100% correct on that. I don't know. Right? Like if he's the guy that he was when he got hurt, which was Big East Player of the Year caliber, then yes, like St. John's is going to be very, very good. Will he be that guy? I would lean towards that probably being what happens, right? Like you can come back from a torn ACL, you can recover. It's been 2 years since he's really played high level basketball, which means like he's working out, he's probably in shape, but it's still 2 years since you've been in those game situations. So we'll see. My expectations for this group, Fana, are that they will be right there competing for a Big East regular season championship. They'll be right there competing for a Big East tournament championship, and they'll be right there competing for the Final Four. If the point guard situation plays out, and if Bryce Hopkins is the best version of himself, could easily end up being a 1 seed with the schedule that they put together heading into the tournament. And I don't think that that's an exaggeration to say.
And that's awfully tasty because St. John's hasn't been to a Final Four since the legendary Big East 85 season, where it was St. John's and Georgetown and Villanova, and that still stands in 85, in an era and class of its own. So this is going to be super intriguing to see. And you think about the conference realignment, Rob, now that could end, right? Where we're going to see 3 SECs, 3 Big 12s, because this past year you had Florida, you had Auburn, but you had Houston and Duke, and could Houston be in the Elite Eight, right? Tennessee. Right?
Yeah, Tennessee. They beat Tennessee.
So they denied it. I remember like that day, I remember being like, all right, could have 3 SEC. And then it wasn't that way. Those days, could end, but that 1985 year, look, I think it would be ultra just amazing in the sport when you're talking about a guy who's about to turn 73 years of age in Rick Pitino. Take St. John's University, which sits on Utopia Parkway in Queens, and frankly has been through, before he got there, 20 plus years of irrelevance and some not good decisions and some tough hires and debt. What's powerful about this that goes beyond the roster is that, Rob, for so long, you and I talked about this job and this program and what it could be. But it had been so long that if you asked a prospective coach, they didn't have much interest in the place because they had just seen the degree of recent failures. What Pitino has done is he's lifted a standard, but he's shown whoever comes next, This is what's possible if you have the right people on your side and you have this type of mentality. I know you're not going to be me, but I think that's what's extraordinary about this. We weren't doing off-season breakdowns on St. John's beforehand, and now we are because they're a national force again. That's good for college basketball. It's good for the Garden to have a presence on a college basketball Saturday, and it's even more powerful when I know whoever's next isn't going to be Rick Pitino. And I'm not saying I know it. I think Rick Pitino's going to coach at least 3-4 more years. I believe that wholeheartedly. I don't think he's slowing down at all. But I think you've shown the monster, the sleeping giant that this program is. And we got to see how transfer portal talent comes together. But to me, that's what makes it a juicy storyline because it moved. There are certain things in college hoops that move the needle. And people talk about that old Big East and St. John's and that brand. But it became yesteryear. It became like, oh, remember that? Remember? It's like at a certain point, you want to slap somebody across the face and say, stop telling me remember. Where's the new? Where's the now? Well, it's happening. And if you're a St. John's fan, you should be thrilled. And they showed, Rob, this past year, when they're good, they get followed like I'm not saying the same amount of fans, but in New York, they get the media attention of the Knicks, the Yankees. They become a pro team, attention-wise.
Yes, and it helps when you have a gentleman by the name of Rick Pitino running that program. All right, off-season grades, I'm going A-. Getting Zuby back was, I think, the single biggest thing that you could have done. Getting Bryce Hopkins in was a steal because I don't know how many people thought he was going to end up there. And I love Ian Jackson in theory. Maybe not necessarily as a point guard, but I would go with A-. Could have used a little bit more front court depth. Missed on Xavier Lee, who ended up going to Florida, who would have solved some of your point guard problems. Would be an A+ to me if they had if I felt a little bit more comfortable about the point guard situation. But at the end of the day, you have a roster of talent that's good enough to be in the mix and play with anybody. And you have Rick Pitino, and he is still on the sideline, and it's hard to argue with any of that.
Because they couldn't have really done much better in the transfer portal. Because Ian Jackson, Bryce Hopkins, Joe Sannon, I wouldn't have predicted all those guys to be on the same team. Mm-hmm. Because their talent caliber says they could all, if those guys, here's the thing about St. John's, they have multiple alpha candidates.
Yes.
And that's it. Now, what's the caveat with that? There's one ball. Who they playing through late? Big question with this team, but from a talent perspective, they get an A.
Yep, there you have it. A from Fanta. This has been an episode of the Field of 68 off-season grades. Keep it tuned on this channel and to our podcast feed. We will have about 40 to 45 of these going up throughout August and September to get you ready for the college basketball season, which is going to be here in less than 100 days. Fanta, I can't wait. Appreciate you being here, man.
Let's go, Rob. I can't wait either. Thanks.